The moment Jasmine Crockett stepped onto the stage at Lakewood Church, nobody expected what was coming. Not the 30,000 people filling the sanctuary, not the pastors seated in polished front-row chairs, and certainly not Joel Osteen himself. Cameras were rolling, lights were blazing, and the entire evening had been marketed as a faith and justice conversation, carefully designed to inspire unity, hope, and encouragement. Everything about it felt curated, safe, and predictable, but unity wasn't what the night would deliver. Jasmine Crockett had been invited as a guest voice, a rising political figure known for clarity, conviction, and an unwillingness to dilute truth for comfort. Joel believed he could guide the conversation, keep it warm, and demonstrate how faith could bridge divides. His team assumed Jasmine would soften on stage, meet Joel's gentle smile with polite diplomacy, and stay within the invisible boundaries of positivity. Instead, in just a few seconds, she would unravel an argument Joel had repeated for over a decade, and the largest church in America would fall into a silence no one could script. It began with a question Joel had asked countless times before, one that positioned him as a wise spiritual guide lifting people above hardship. But this time, he directed it towards someone who had lived through struggle, not as an idea, but as a reality. Someone who understood poverty, injustice, and responsibility in ways that couldn't be smoothed over with a smile. Joel leaned back, hands folded gently, voice calm and reassuring. "Jasmine, wouldn't you agree that most people stay stuck in life because they speak negativity over themselves instead of believing in God's favor?" It sounded harmless, encouraging even, but beneath it lived a dangerous implication. That suffering is self-inflicted, that hardship is a failure of mindset, that struggle is proof of weak faith. The audience nodded instinctively. They had heard this message for years. Agreement felt automatic. Jasmine didn't respond right away. She blinked slowly, exhaled once, and in that brief pause, the room unknowingly held its breath. But before she spoke, something else mattered. Something that had begun 30 minutes earlier in a quiet hallway behind the stage, far from the cameras and applause. In the green room, Jasmine had stood alone holding a handwritten note from a woman named Christina Alvarez. Christina had pressed it into her hand in the lobby, whispering, "Please read this before you speak." The note was short but heavy with pain. "I lost my home after giving money I didn't have. They told me God would bless me back. He never did. My son thinks it's my fault. Please say something tonight. People like me need someone strong enough to tell the truth." Jasmine folded the paper carefully. She had seen this story before, again and again. Families stretched thin by guilt-driven generosity. Mothers choosing tithes over groceries. Seniors donating medicine money. People taught that lack meant failure, and abundance was proof of righteousness. If she stayed quiet, nothing would change. If she spoke, backlash would come. But silence would cost far more. Back on stage, Joel repeated the question, expecting agreement or deflection. But Jasmine recognized the trap instantly. Agreeing meant validating blame. Disagreeing meant challenging the very foundation of the message this space was built on. Still, she didn't flinch. She lifted her head and spoke calmly. "Joel, I don't believe people stay stuck because of negativity." A murmur passed through the sanctuary. "I believe they stay stuck because nobody tells the truth about how hard life really is." Joel smiled, preparing to redirect, but Jasmine continued, her voice steady, grounded. "Struggle isn't a mindset problem. Poverty isn't a speaking problem. People aren't suffering because they're negative. They're suffering because the world is heavy and they're human." Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "Stop telling hurting people their pain is their fault." 30,000 people went silent. No applause. No reaction. Just stillness. She spoke again, holding Christina's note. "People lose homes because wages are low, not because their words are wrong. People get sick because life is fragile, not because they didn't pray correctly. And people give until they break because they're desperate for hope." Joel tried to respond, but nothing came. His smile faded, replaced with something unfamiliar, uncertainty. Jasmine wasn't attacking. She was naming what had been ignored for years. "Encouragement is good," she said. "Blame is not." And something shifted. Tears began quietly, not from sadness, but release. People who had blamed themselves for years finally felt seen. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt honest. When the event ended, people didn't rush out. They lined up to thank her, to hand her notes, to say what they had never been allowed to say out loud. And later, away from the lights, Joel stood beside her and admitted softly, "People really are hurting." "They're not broken," Jasmine replied. "They're just tired." The silence that night didn't end the conversation. It began one, because sometimes truth doesn't arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives with compassion, and everything finally stops long enough to listen.